The people who are at these hackathons are the perfect sort of like test user.
I'm joined today by Carter, who leads DevRel at Langflow. I met Carter at a hackathon he organized, and it was absolutely brilliant. So I wanted to get him on to learn about why you should do a hackathon if you should, and how to do it well.
You can do these on a shoestring for sure. You work up the ladder and you can offer more and more and more. So long as your fundamental motivation for creating this experience is to serve your community, then I think honestly, like anybody can do it. There is no substitute for having a team of engineers trying to use your tool and being there in person to like understand what they're running into. You're going to get a lot of like high quality product feedback. My first exposure to hackathons was when I got into developer relations. So, I've been a lifelong programmer and engineer. I've had a lot of different jobs over my career, but I got into DevRel in 2012. And that was right around the time that there was kind of an explosion in API companies, right? There's sort of like this API ecosystem. People might remember. So I worked at a company called Twilio, which is still around. But there were companies like Mashery, and there's this whole sort of sea change in how developers thought about building applications. And it was built on top of the idea of these cloud-based APIs. That you could sort of treat like Legos, and you could build amazing experiences and amazing applications by combining Twilio with Stripe with something else. And I feel like hackathons, at least like modern hackathons, like the hackathons that that I'm familiar with and that you kind of participated in, like I think those really did start like around 2011, 2012. And I think that they started because one of the things that hackathons are great at is like helping developers get out of their job and get out of their sort of like fixed mindsets about like what they work on for a living and be more creative and engage in a form of play, right? And these APIs were perfect for that. If you think about engineering before APIs, like, I don't know, like building Windows apps or, whatever it was that happened back in the 80s or early 90s, like what did it mean to build software? Well, it meant that you had to have like a pretty heavy duty IDE, like Visual Studio or something. And you had to maybe get your hands on some pretty powerful SDKs that you would also have to download or get on a CD if you wanted to build like an app or a game. It was really heavyweight. And in the era of self-service, like free sign-up cloud APIs, you could get developers in a room, give them, have them sign up for a bunch of free accounts, maybe give them some free API keys, point them at some documentation, and then unleash them and sort of like let them be creative for the next 24 to 48 hours and incentivize them, right? Give them, dangle some prizes, create a little bit of competitive, dynamics and see what they create. And I think that's kind of what happened. Like I just saw, this was a really, like rich era of people creating these hackathon events. And I think the why behind it was like this confluence of two things, right? You had a bunch of API companies that were looking to drive more awareness about their offerings. Twilio at the time, Twilio is a small company, Stripe's a small company. Like they're not developers are not like sufficiently aware that these products and solutions exist. And then from the perspective of the developers, it was just sort of an opportunity to get away from their job for a weekend and engage in a creative endeavor.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like audit trails, SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. And for user management, the first 1 million monthly active users are completely free. Let's hear from Utpal from Digger.dev, a dev tool using WorkOS.
How it's designed is that you can start as early as day zero. But for us, it wasn't day zero. It was closer to when we first started monetizing because we didn't have a sign up at all. People could just anonymously use our tool. So it was a little later, coincided with when we wanted to start monetizing, and we needed a nice enterprise feature set. If you're open source and you're doing enterprise first, the minute you think about monetization is when you should think about WorkOS. To be honest, if we do that again, I think we'd think about that on day zero, to be honest, because we should have done it on day zero, ideally. Anonymous usage should be permitted, but you should know who's using your tool. It should be optional, 100%. It should be opt-in, 100%. But it'd be great to have auth from day zero. You don't necessarily think about these enterprise features, but they still lead to revenue. And it kind of is a no-brainer in that sense. So yeah, I highly recommend.
What I've heard is some people are like, we don't do any in-person events. We just, we invest that money into content, and we reach way more people than we would ever reach in person. And I've heard a lot of companies say that. What do you think is the kind of the way that someone should think about it, or the whys that people would?
Yeah, the framework that I use for thinking about hackathons is the framework that I use for thinking about developer relations in general, right? So first of all, step one, if the idea for participating in a hackathon is purely coming out of a marketing team or organization at a company, there's something is wrong, right? I know that I mentioned that hackathons are great for driving awareness, but there are a bunch of other things that are incredibly important. And there are significantly cheaper ways that you can drive awareness, right? So the way that I think about developer relations is that fundamentally the function of developer relations is to serve developers, to sort of help them be successful. And sometimes that means being successful with your company's product, and sometimes it's being successful without your company's product, right? But there's a high degree of service-oriented attitudes that are embedded in a lot of developer relations professionals, and there's a lot of empathy that comes from working in developer relations. So when I take a step back and I think about, how can a hackathon help us serve developers? There's a few things that we can do. So one is awareness. I know marketing has kind of a bad, I don't know, it leaves a bad taste in a lot of engineers' mouths. There's a trope that if you build a really amazing tool, you don't need to do any marketing. People will just sort of magically find it. I think that isn't true. There are perhaps some examples of that working. I think for the most part, that's not true. I think that if you work on a developer tool that you authentically believe is of use to some subset of developers for some subset of use cases, if you don't do something beyond simply launching it, to the internet to make people aware that it exists, you're not serving them, right? I mean, someone at some point figured out that you could use Twilio to power two-factor authentication. I assure you, two-factor authentication was not something that was in somebody's brain at Twilio, right? There was no thought process oh yeah, this is great for 2FA and TFA, and we should actually launch our own TFA product. That's not true. Twilio did one thing and it did it well. It was a Lego. Some really smart people used the Lego to create a two-factor authentication product, to create many of them. One of those two-factor authentication products was a startup called Authy, and Twilio ended up acquiring Authy, several years after they launched. But once again, how did the Authy founder first even understand that you could programmatically send and receive text messages? How did this happen? So I think connecting developers to these solutions is important. But beyond that, what else happens? One thing that I don't know how much you saw this at Hacking Agents. There's a tremendous product feedback loop that happens at these events, right? There is no substitute for having a team of engineers at an event. So I was there, and several of my team was there, and sort of sitting shoulder to shoulder with developers who are trying to build something and they're trying to use your tool, and they're experiencing some friction, right? And being there in person to like understand what they're running into and what's blocking them and what's slowing them down. Because the thing is, like, the people who are at these hackathons are the perfect sort of like test user, right?
Early adopters.
Well, they're just sort of, it's not just that they're early adopters. Like they're motivated. They're open-minded. There are a lot of characteristics about these people that actually make them perfect, because the truth is none of them really want to come ask you for help, right? Most of them feel like, hey, just point me to the docs and then I'll see you in 48 hours when I show you what I've built, right? So these people, like they're motivated. They're most of them are experienced. And so when they come to you with issues, like, you need to listen. You're like, wow, like these, like, despite all the information that we gave them up front, hey, here's a link to the docs, here's a link to this, here's literally a tutorial. Like we sort of seed people with the best content that we have for getting started. So when they run into issues, it's generally like an issue with our product, right? Or an issue with the experience. Another thing that I think people misunderstand about dev tools, like, the product isn't just the zeros and ones that you ship to the cloud, right? Like the docs, to me, like the docs are part of the product. The tutorials are part of the product. The sign-up experience is like this core part of the product, right? So when you have kind of a more comprehensive definition of what the product is, you're going to get a lot of like high quality product feedback that we document and then we turn around and provide to the product and engineering teams.
Yeah, to get that equivalent amount of like feedback would be so hard in a kind of traditional sense, and you're only going to get like a snapshot. You're not going to get someone like sat down building it for like 12 hours. I know there's like user research companies, but I feel like it's usually like an hour or two that someone just tries out your product, and it's
almost worse than that, right? I mean, those things are incredibly expensive. Like, if you talk to people who have sort of done like user research panels, it's very expensive. Like to sort of like, get the people lined up. It's like it's expensive time wise, and sometimes it's expensive monetarily. Like and you're right. It's kind of this artificial like 1 hour window. Like, hey, sit down and complete this task, and then like people are scribbling on like notepads like how long it took the person to complete the task. Like you're just missing a lot of nuance, and you're having them operate in kind of an artificial environment as opposed to real life, right? So forget about hackathons, right? Like the ideal for every developer tool founder who's listening, like, what's the ideal experience, right? The ideal experience is that for some reason someone visits your website. They word of mouth, something smart that you did on Hacker News, like they come to your website, right? And the happy path is that they almost instantly understand the problems that you're solving and how your tool works, and they kind of like almost instantly like self-select into like, yes, this is for me. And then they sign up for free for some kind of limited trial. They onboard relatively painlessly, and really like the truth is, like, you never hear from them, right? They happily integrate your tool into what they're building, and then over time they grow and grow and grow, and eventually they become a paying customer, and you simply never hear from them because you've done everything perfectly. Now, this is not real. Like, this doesn't actually happen in real life, but this is the happy path.
True.
This is what you iterate towards, right? I mean, like, this doesn't exist when you launch your product, but you iterate towards it, right? So it's this iterative journey you're on to reducing the time to value, reducing the number of support tickets, just reducing the friction, so that eventually, like, you really do have the majority of your developers kind of coming into this experience and almost instantly, being successful, right? But hackathons are just a tremendous accelerant for that kind of stuff. Like, there's almost everything that we'll talk about that happens at a hackathon, you can imagine other like vectors for achieving the same goal. I think what's useful about the hackathon is that it all kind of gets rolled up into this one experience that, once again, like happens over the course of a weekend and is relatively inexpensive. Another thing that happens at a hackathon is that you end up sort of having really great engagement with local developer communities, right? So think about so at Hacking Agents, which took place in London about a month ago. Sorry, not sure when this podcast will go out, but
yeah, sometime.
Sometime, right? But I worked with AI tinkerers. Which is at this point kind of a global community of AI developers, but they have like a really vibrant chapter in London that's actually organized by Luke Harries, which is a great guy. You've had him on your podcast, and if it wasn't for this hackathon, I don't know that we would have I would have come in contact with AI tinkerers or come into contact with Luke, right? And I think that a lot of how I think about DevRel is about engaging authentically with developers, engaging with the communities that those developers belong to, and seeing how we can help, right? Like, how can we serve these developers? How can we serve these communities? How can we work together on things? Like, I'm positive that like we'll end up doing some really fun and interesting things with AI tinkerers moving forward. But this hackathon happened to be like a really great opportunity to make the introduction and to kind of build the connection.
I guess you just get such a good over the weekends, like you're there for a long time. It's like a real connection rather than just like you got introduced over email and like you kind of barely remember their name or whatever. It's like, it's a depth of connection.
Everyone who's there is a professional software engineer, right? And there's a lot of both excitement and anxiety about AI, right? So first, like, let's talk about what's new. Like what are the latest models that have shipped and what's different about them and like what can you do with them, right? And that's really important, right? Because if you're a professional software engineer, like you increasingly have to understand these things. Like the more that you don't understand these things, the more you don't understand how AI works or what's new, the more you're in jeopardy in terms of like your relevance in this field, right? And secondly, you want to connect with your peers, right? You want to, for all kinds of reasons, there's a lot of reasons that people network. Like sometimes it's about looking for a new job. Sometimes it's about looking for co-founders. Sometimes it's just about, sharing information and sharing experiences. But AI tinkerers is, those two pillars are something that I see come up in their events over and over again. And then sort of bringing this back to Hacking Agents and the hackathon, like we help them do that, right? So there's sort of just a practical sort of like benefit. It provides some leverage. But frankly, like when I like almost all the time when I talk to the people who lead these communities, you can almost think of them as like super developers, and in a sense that they have spent so much time talking to people like me and like evaluating tools in the AI space that they've just developed like an incredibly like keen sense of like, what's a good tool for in the AI space, what's a bad tool. So even just getting to know these people and talking to them, the kind of feedback and the kind of thoughts that you can get from them is incredibly valuable, right? Because not only are they really, really smart about the AI tooling space, they're also I don't want to say that they represent how their community feels, but people that are good community organizers are like in touch with the members of their community, right? Like they're sort of, they talk to them, they kind of understand what their concerns are or their needs are. And so the people who lead these communities are just fantastic folks to talk to. Like they're just really, really smart about the kind of problems that developers are facing, the obstacles that they're dealing with. And that can just be really, really useful when you're trying to build tools that unblock developers or like give them new capabilities that they didn't have before.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just almost imagining Swix while you talk about this person of it's like the kind of like embodiment of that.
I can tell you a fun story. This was one of, I mean, I've lost track of the number of hackathons that I've been to, but one of the first ones that's like burned into my brain. I'm assuming you're familiar with Firebase.
Yeah, I used to use it a lot actually.
Fantastic. I mean, for folks that are listening that don't know what it is, just Google it. It's an amazing tool. But back in 2012, when I worked at Twilio, we sponsored a hackathon called AngelHack, and they had a San Francisco event that was really, really well run. But I'll just never forget this. There was a small team from a startup, like an unknown startup at the time called Firebase. And
Really?
there was this guy. Yeah, sure. I mean, you go, but look, man, go back far enough. And like every startup is unknown, right? Like once upon a time, no one knew what Stripe was. And so like, yeah, they had like just come out of YC, and they had like just basically launched. I'd never heard of them. And one of their founders, James Tamplin, went up on stage, and every vendor, every sponsor is given like a 5-minute window to get up on stage and demo their dev tool. James just absolutely blew everybody away. Like I was dumbfounded by what I saw. Now I'm sure people just take all this real-time web stuff for granted, but at the time, it was completely novel, completely new, and it was just staggering. Like, and I swear to God, like every team at that event used Firebase, because it just
I'm guessing it was something like you change it on this tab, and then like. It's like you change a field in this, and then it's like synchronized, and
I honestly wish I could remember the details. It might have even been better than that. Yeah. Like it might have been one of those things where I'm sorry, James, if you're listening and I'm wrong about this, but I think it might have been something where he asked everyone to take out their phone and like just go to a URL, and then like on their phone there was some kind of action they could take. And then he was in a position to like show off a dashboard of some kind where like in real time, as people are clicking or doing things, it's all being represented. Right. And it was just like magical. It's just like, and also it's not magic where it's black box magic. Like he showed the code, right? Firebase did not invent WebSockets, right? So like this is the classic thing where like people on Hacker News are like, I don't understand why people care about Dropbox. Like, can't you just build this using secure FTP and some scripts? It's just like Firebase didn't invent WebSockets, but they invented they wrapped WebSockets in a developer experience that was so like clever and so amazing that like the minute you saw it, you're like, this is exactly how I want to write code. And it was just quite magical for me. Like that's like this perfect like healthy story where like like this small startup drove some awareness, probably got some great product feedback during the event, was able to sort of like engage with the community in San Francisco, and then the developers like they learned a new tool that like helped them like in their journey of being like a professional software engineer.
Yeah, is it like, do you think like hackathons are most useful at the kind of like earlier stage while you're still refining the product, or do you think there's like it's like always similar amounts of utility?
No, I think they're it's I love how you framed it. You can be too early. So here's some anti-patterns. Do not use hackathons as QA, right? Like, like if you're too early,
you already know.
I mean,
it's just
if you're too early, if you're too early, and you haven't really, your docs are not very good, or your platform is buggy, like don't go to a hackathon, because you will do more harm than good. You'll spend time and money teaching developers that your platform is not reliable, or is or just doesn't work right.
I actually had a friend that went to a hackathon, and I was going to go with him, but I I flaked. And I texted him and I was like, how was it? And he was like, oh, dude, I can't remember what the tool was called, but he was like, it was just, the tool was rubbish. Like, it didn't work. Like, didn't do any of the stuff it said it was going to do. And I was like, oh, okay.
So that's like that's the too early example. And then like, yeah, sure, there's plenty of too late example. I mean, look, if you're, I don't know, if you're the business owner for like S3, like AWS S3, like, yeah, I mean, I guess you could spend time and money, going to a hackathon, but good Lord, I mean, your product is like as fully baked as humanly possible. Like anyone, like, I mean, like everybody has heard of S3. I mean, like when we just go these, awareness, product feedback. I mean, I guess you could argue there's some degree of community engagement, but like for what purpose? Yeah, I think there's definitely this sort of like a too late story.
You want to go to hackathons with your kind of like Goldilocks product where it's like not too early, not too late, and just right where you can learn some stuff, but it does still work.
Yeah. I think the Goldilocks thing, it's also like, it's like a fat bell curve, right? Like you don't like, if you imagine like a bell curve like this, right? I think most products that are kind of in that 80%, like you can get a lot of value out of a hackathon. It's just sort of like those too earlys and like too lates on the edges. Don't waste your time. The other thing I would say is that these are low cost experiments, right? If you're a founder and you're just not sure, I mean, bias for action, right? I mean, it's like you should. I mean, you should apply reasonable amounts of judgment for anything that you do, but bias for action, right? Don't set too high a bar for yourself. You can do reasonable amounts of like internal testing with both your product and your docs to kind of like get a feel. Think of it like this, right? Like if you wouldn't launch your product on Product Hunt or Hacker News, well then sure, like don't spend the time and the money on a hackathon. But if you would, I mean, if you have already launched your product on these like large scale distribution platforms, oh well, then you should certainly go to a hackathon.
If someone is running a hackathon, have you got any things that they should worry about and things they shouldn't worry about, that sort of thing?
The developer events that I like to go to, and once again, this is not specific to hackathons, but the developer events that I like to go to are the ones that are run by people who are developers. Because I think that those people have tremendous empathy and understanding for developers. Well, I mean, first of all, there's sort of the basic event stuff that we don't need to spend too much time on, right? Like you're going to need to have a venue. If your event is happening in the summer, you should look for one that has AC.
Good luck in London.
I know. Yeah, we learned that the hard way in Shoreditch a month ago or so. But I mean, all kidding aside, you wanna find a venue, and you want to find a venue that has good Wi-Fi, and you want to find a venue that has lots of plugs, right? And once again, like this is stuff that people can just forget. But look, every single one of these people is going to have a laptop, right? They're going to want to download things. They're going to want to pip install things, right? So you're going to need to have good Wi-Fi, good bandwidth, and for something that's taking place over the course of 24 or 48 hours, they're going to want to plug in their laptops, right? So there's a bunch of sort of basic venue bits that you need. The next ingredient is sort of like partners. I was going to use the word sponsor. I mean, sure, like, but you really like, you're going to need to find a set of companies that you can partner with that are going to provide the people who are coming with like interesting tools for them to play with, right? So we've done on the Langflow team, we've done 3 hackathons over the past like 4 to 5 months. The first one was in San Francisco. The second one was in New York City, and the most recent one was in London. And we worked really hard to like think about like who we want to work with to kind of give developers interesting things to play with. If you think of dev tools or Legos, like you've got to give developers a bunch of interesting Legos that they can plug together to build interesting things, right? And then, I mean, honestly, like the third thing is you need the people. right? I mean, I think some people are going to show up and they're going to solo code, which is totally fine. But a lot of people are going to show up and they're going to want to meet other people. They're going to want to join teams. You're going to have people with different skill sets. You're going to have people that are like really great back-end developers and some people that are like awesome on the front end. And you're going to want to find ways to plug these people together so that together they can build really interesting things. And you're gonna, so you're gonna have to work with, you're gonna have to figure out like how do we promote the event? How do we spread the word? How do we work with local communities to sort of like promote the event? Events require, you're looking for like an energetic, fun event, right? Like with hacking agents, like one of my overriding concerns was that like even though we had prizes, like I wanted everyone who left the event to feel like, wow, I had so much fun. This is so amazing. Like I can't wait for this to happen again. Right. Like that's the emotional feeling that I wanted people to leave with. And you really want people to feel like they're participating in like a large, like vibrant, fun event, right? It's like you don't want to go to a bar that's empty, right? You don't want to go to a concert that's empty. You don't want to go to a hackathon that's empty. Even if it meant that like by default you would win all the prizes. So as an organizer, as a prospective organizer, like make sure you have like a promotional plan that makes sense and that helps you reach the kind of developers that you're trying to reach.
Do you remember what kind of promotional stuff you did for hacking agents?
So a lot of it was just sort of what you might think of as organic, right? Like DataStax we have customers, and we were able to email them and promote the event. Working with communities like AI Tinkerers, they were able to help us promote the event. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do that I would sort of think of as organic. And I think we did a little bit of like paid advertising to promote the event too. But it was like very low cost in the grand scheme of things. And it kind of worked out, right? Like I think the venue that we had, I think like totally like maxed out at 150 people. Like if we filled every single chair. And I think we ended up with like a little over like 135 people.
Wow.
So it all kind of worked out. But sincerely, like these are relatively low cost executions. When we talk about like sponsoring larger events, like sponsoring like a big conference or something, the cost of sponsoring any kind of conference can run anywhere from like $15,000 to like $100,000 or more, right? I mean, it's like there's it can be incredibly expensive to sponsor large events. And it doesn't mean it's not worthwhile, right? But it can just be very expensive. I think either running or participating in hackathons is like an order of magnitude less expensive. So like it's so the ROI on it is really high. Like to run a hackathon soup to nuts, like you should probably budget anywhere from like $5,000 to $25,000, right? And I'm giving you like a broad range because it just depends, right? Like can you get a venue for free, right? Cloudflare hosted our event in San Francisco for free. DigitalOcean,
that's probably the biggest cost, I guess. Usually,
it can be catering. Catering is a solid second, right? So, like, what are the costs? I mean, like, you can spend like an unlimited amount of money on these things, but fundamentally, like, you need to have a venue, you need to have catering, and you probably want to have prizes, right? Like, that's sort of like. And then like you might splurge on a better AV setup, or a camera crew for to capture some like marketing materials.
Wild camera crew, right? That was like a real pro setup.
Well, we did, but like I think that like honestly we didn't do that for the first two events. So we didn't have a camera crew for the San Francisco or the New York event. And I decided that it was worth it to spend a little bit of money to have a crew for the third event, because we want to do more of these things, right? Like we want to do more. Like I want to do many more of these events, like in other markets that we haven't served yet, and we just want to come. We want to come back to London and San Francisco and New York. So we want to make sure that like when a developer is asking themselves the question like, geez, am I really going to spend my weekend doing this instead of being with my friends or being with my family? It's really useful to like have some videos, just to have a picture, right?
What can you expect?
A picture is worth 1,000 words, and I guess like a video is worth 1,000,000. I mean, you want to. I think like when we talk about like once again, like the whole like how can you tell if an event is going to be a good event or a bad event? Like I just continue to have this heuristic about like who's running it. And I think that the people who are running it for the right reasons they're going to have a really great venue. And they're going to do a really great job of attracting the right people, and they're going to have good food, and they're going to have good coffee, and they're just going to create a really vibrant, fun experience. And you want to capture that in photos and in videos so that you can show it to people so that they can kind of make their own decision for future events. If you're a developer and you only get to go to one conference a year, and you haven't had the benefit of talking to, of getting sort of word of mouth advice from people, oftentimes like you just go to a website. You go to a website and you're just kind of, I don't know, you're looking to see who the speakers are. And then that's all the information you have before you click the button to buy the ticket. And you only get to go to one a year. And I hate to say this, but a lot of conferences are run by people that put completely fictitious speakers on their websites. Like they just make it up. It's real. Especially in the AI space. Like we have been asked to sponsor AI conferences where I do the most basic due diligence. I go to the website, I see who's speaking, and I've reached out to, I won't name them, but I've reached out to the founders of these AI startups, and who I know personally, and I've asked them like, are you speaking at this event? And the answer is like, no. Like I've never even heard of this event. Yeah,
that's
sure,
so
but it's look, it's awful. It's truly awful. But it's like it's just sort of a buyer beware thing, right?
Yeah, and so I feel like the visuals and stuff, all that sort of stuff is just giving much more like credence. This is a real thing. This is like worth being the one conference or hackathon
or the one hackathon. I mean, I just think it's I understand. Look, we literally live in an AI era of like, I don't know, man, like auto generated videos. I mean, I just think that like it's worth spending the money and the time to like help give people more information and give them more of a feel of what the event is like. And also like I'm a huge believer in like giving people more information, not just so that they can opt in, but so that they can opt out. But yeah, anyway, I think you asked about like just in general, like the sort of like the cost structure for these things. Like you can do these on a shoestring for sure. And then as you sort of build a community, assuming you want to do a second, and assuming you want to do more of these things, you can bring on partners that can provide budget so that you can sort of like up level, right? So you want to the venue and the Wi-Fi is like don't even venue Wi-Fi plugs. That's like the bare minimum, right? Like you need it. Then can you get a sponsor? Great, now you can have food. Can you get another sponsor? Great, like now you can have prizes, right? And you just sort of you work up the ladder of sponsors, and you can offer more and more and more. And I think what's super important is that so long as your fundamental motivation for creating this experience is to serve your community, and you're not just sort of like looking to like start a business, then I think honestly, like it's not that hard, and anybody can do it. I think that my observation backwards looking is that most of the people who get into hackathons with a thought of building like a large scale business around it, most of them fail. And even the ones who succeed often end up creating events that I wouldn't recommend to people. And that don't often like serve developers very well.
I was actually just thinking, like, if anyone's listening to this and wants to run a hackathon, they should like email me in, and I can just put them in touch, because like I'll put them in touch with you. It should just be like a group of people that want to like organize hackathons, because it seems like that's so I just want to go to more. There's like need more in London. For
Yeah,
sure.
well, I mean, we haven't talked about it, Jack, but geez, I mean, we're kind of skipping over the fact that there was a pandemic and like, like there used to be tons of hackathons. I think uh, a lot of people have mixed feelings about AI, but one of the amazing things to come out of AI in the last few years is that it has really reignited events. Not just
True.
hackathons, but hackathons, meetups, conferences. Like it's given people an overwhelming reason to like learn a new thing, to get together in person. And I'm really grateful for that. So I'm with you. Like I want there to be more hackathons in general. And I'm perfectly happy if they're AI hackathons. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think almost every. I mean, I wouldn't even know what a non-AI hackathon would look like these days. Like I mean, what
Yeah,
isn't AI, right? And
true.
I think it turns out like the instruction manual is like not that complicated. You just need to sort of find some people that yeah, you need to find an underserved market, right? Like I think London is being better and better served over time, but there are a lot of cities where there hasn't been a hackathon in the last 12 months, right? So for people who live in those cities, like you can totally do it. And Jack, you're more than welcome to share my contact information with them.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Reach out if people want to bring hacking agents to their city.
Oh, I mean,
Actually,
or
on
bring
that,
bring bring any bring anything to their city. It
bring
doesn't have to be
anything to
hacking
their city.
agents. That's right.
Okay, anything. Okay, one thing I did want to ask as well that I thought was interesting is when we were chatting, I think it was in potentially over margaritas after the
No, no.
hackathon. But it is actually like a real topic. So you were talking about you had like kind of cities that you focus on, which I hadn't heard anyone say before, and I was really happy that London was one of those cities.
Yeah.
But could you share about like firstly like which cities you focus on, and then like why you think of it on like a city level?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think different companies and I don't know, different startups, like they have an idea of, who their sort of like ideal customer is or who their ideal developer is. For some of those companies, like they focus on the student audience. On the Langflow team, we're focusing on professional software engineers that are either actively building AI products or at least AI prototypes, or folks that are very, very interested in sort of getting in figuring out how to like apply AI to the things that they're building. So that's the kind of person that we're trying to reach. And yeah, no, obviously you can. I won't get into like the boring details, but like you can see different cities around the world where there's simply more activity in the AI space from an engineering perspective. So I think the cities I shared with you were, by the way, I'm now repeating myself, right? Like so, San Francisco, New York City, London. Those are just the top three markets where we notice that startups, companies, and individual engineers are doing a ton of work with AI. Often, what if you're going to dig into the reasons? There are large centers of excellence in those cities. So, for instance, Google has a huge like campus of people working on Gemini and other AI tooling in London. I like literally walked by it as I was meeting a friend for lunch. I forget the exact neighborhood I was in, right? But I walked by this
I
huge
think it's
buildings.
King's Cross.
Yeah, it probably was, right? And so I was just like, oh wow, like I was just pointing at it. I'm like, wow, that's where that stuff is happening. So there's just a ton. There's a center of excellence in London for a lot of AI engineering. San Francisco, like I don't have to say anything more about that, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
it's the heavyweight titan, and sort of
Yes.
like centers of excellence for AI engineering. And same with New York. There's a lot of like really interesting stuff happening in New York. Um, and by the way, I'm sure I'm leaving like cities out, and people maybe they can hit me up on Twitter and tell me what I missed. But I don't mean to slight any other city that is doing really interesting things. I think from a pure field marketing perspective, This is like less DevRel, and this is more just sort of generic field marketing. But like you have limited people, and you have limited money, and like limited resources overall. So sure, like is there a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh city that we should sort of serve? Probably. But right now, I've got a team of 4 people that are sort of geographically spread around the world. And we have to balance the time that we spend on the road and in the field with the time doing more of the scalable activities that you talked about earlier, right? Creating content, working with the product team, improving our tutorials. Those are the kind of things that those are also incredibly important in terms of our mission of serving developers. So we have to be really careful and thoughtful about like when do we kind of go to an event, and which events will we go to, and like what markets are going to provide like the highest ROI, or just provide like the most leverage.
Yeah, I can imagine that it does language come into it as well, because I was speaking to the guys at Mastra, and they were saying like that 20% of their users are in Japan, which is like was kind of shocking to me. But Japan seems like significantly more like for most companies are going to be based in the US, right? Like, and then like it's like London is quite easy to come to, it's like same language, like, but like if you're going to Japan, it's like probably need like someone on the ground who really is like bilingual and all this sort of stuff. It's probably like more difficult. I don't know.
You're completely right about Japan. I don't know what the usage of Langflow is in Japan. I'm actually, you've made me curious. I'm going to have to go look into it. I feel really confident that the Master team did some really smart things localizing their documentation in multiple languages. It's sort of especially like with AI these days, like there's like it's relatively easy to use AI to do that. I have heard from like many different people that from a field marketing perspective, you should never even consider or bother going to Japan unless you have strong language skills. So sure, I mean, you can say bilingual, but like, that might be unnecessary. Like you might simply need to have people who are completely fluent in Japanese, which by the way, like is very different than most other countries. Most other countries, you can pick anyone, right? You could pick Brazil or Germany or Spain, right? Most other countries, you almost can't be a developer unless you are bilingual and have some competency speaking English. It's not fair, but it's just kind of like this organic reflection of the fact that so many developer tools and developer tooling companies came out of English speaking countries, and the documentation is all in English. So I think going backwards in time, like if you were a developer in Portugal, you would really struggle to be successful if you didn't learn English. That fact has not penetrated Japan. So by the way, once again, like no judgment. I as an English speaker, like, I'm lucky in the sense that like I don't have to learn a second language to do the thing that I love, which is programming. And I totally respect anyone in Japan who just has no interest in learning a second language just to sort of be a software engineer. So I think it's incumbent on the companies that want to serve the Japanese audience to like do it the right way, right? Make sure, obviously, like make sure that their documentation is completely translated, hopefully translated as well as possible. And then if you are going to engage like on the ground in a field activity, like make sure you're doing it with people that are like, completely native in the language. And by the way, like not just the language, Jack, but I mean like customs, right? Like events, there's a lot you sort of take for granted, right? Like culturally, the idea, like do you remember when I invited people on stage to kind of raise their hand and say like whether they were looking for people to join their team or they were looking for a team to join? Like I don't know the answer, but like it's possible that would be really culturally insensitive in other countries, right? So you would need to make sure from an event design perspective, like are you being thoughtful and are you tailoring it to the expectations of the people? another like nugget of DevRel wisdom, which I think happens almost like automatically today, but like was not automatic 10 or 15 years ago, was that you should meet developers where they are. So, classic enterprise software, like whatever, like big company stuff was like, hey, like we're Microsoft. If you're a developer, you should come to our Microsoft conference to learn about like our tools. Like this is like we're going back to the 80s and the 90s and stuff, right? That was just like the idea that Microsoft would sponsor a third party conference was a completely ludicrous idea, right? The idea was the developers had to come to them, or the idea that like, if you built a product or an API, like the idea that like it would be available in anything other than like Visual Studio was like laughable, right? Now the world is different. Companies are much better about meeting developers where they already are. So if I use some non-Microsoft IDE, there's a good chance that there's a plugin for some Microsoft product like in my IDE, because companies are getting better at meeting them where they are. But the same is true for events, right? Go to where they are and meet them on their terms. And you'll just sort of, and that's just a high empathy approach. But it works, right? It really helps. It turns out that like when you're trying to get people to like adopt your products, showing them some respect and having empathy for them is something that is really useful.
And so if someone was deciding they were going to go to do some field marketing in Japan, maybe they would sponsor like existing events first of all, or like try and like get a booth somewhere and like that was already happening. Like, is that kind of
if it existed, right? So I think like we kind of said like you should like if you're imagining that you want to run a hackathon, you should first ask yourself like, are they already happening? Like are you filling an unmet need, or are you just jumping on a bandwagon, right? I think in general, it's better to fill unmet needs than to jump on bandwagons. And once again, in terms of like a bias for action, right? Like, if you're kind of 50-50 on it, do it, right? I mean, so long as you have the right intentions and the right attitude, there is very little downside, right? The worst case scenario is that like it turns out that people in a certain market aren't interested in spending the weekend hacking on things. And that's a disappointing like marketing outcome. But it's still, you can learn more from failure than you learn from success, right? Like we, on my team, after every single event that we either run or that we participate in, we write up a 1-page retrospective where we just sort of like make sure that we document everything about what are the things that worked, what are the things that didn't work, and like what did we learn from this event. It's a good sort of it's a good habit to get into. And it's just a good reminder that like nothing ever works perfectly. So long as you're learning something from it, it's valuable too. Like I think you won't be surprised. Like I think that one of the things that didn't work is that the venue didn't have air conditioning. And we booked it in like March, back when temperatures were. I'm sorry, I'm not a good Celsius guy, but like it was a lot cooler back in March. And then by the time we showed up in late June,
that day was so hot.
Sure. But I think like you can learn from it, right? You can realize like, oh, in London, you can't take for granted that every building has AC, right? As an American who has not organized a lot of events in London, like that's just not something that I understood, right? In the US, like pretty much any venue that like would actually charge that would charge you is going to have air conditioning, right? So the lessons that you learn, they just change every time, right? It's another thing, another kind of nugget, like a little nugget of wisdom, I guess, is when I worked at Twilio, and this is not a DevRel thing, this is a company thing. One of the core sort of principles for the company, core values, was that you start with the why. Because the why, like deeply understanding anything, like, understanding developers or understanding like a problem domain, that is how you figure out the what, right? Or the how, right? A real common failure mode with almost anything is people building like playbooks, where it's just like, oh, like here, it's like an instruction manual. Like, oh, here's how you hackathon, or, here's how you build a dev tool, or here's, now those things are not like bad. And I'm not discouraging people from creating those artifacts. But they're kind of like, they're slightly deceptive because it makes it feel like it's assembling IKEA furniture, right? Like if I just do these things, Carter promises it's all going to work out, right? And I think ultimately, I think that those things are useful, but I think like if you need to be a reasonably thoughtful, empathetic, creative, problem-solving kind of person, because you're going to run into things that the instruction manual didn't define, right? Or didn't specify, or the environment is going to change under your feet. Like, I don't know, like people used to behave a certain way and now they're behaving a slightly different way. So for instance, Bolt.new is currently running like arguably the largest hackathon of all time. And it's completely online. I don't have any inside information on what's happening or how it's going. But they've done a great job of, at a bare minimum, driving a lot of awareness about a fully virtualized online event. And I can't wait to see how it goes, right? I know for me, I'm biased towards in-person events, probably because of just how lackluster online events felt during COVID. So my personal bias is like, I want to meet people in person. I want them to meet each other in person. I just think it's more fun to do things in person. And, when you're in person, you can go to an after party at a fun Mexican cocktail place, where Jack, you can wear that really fun shirt and not feel out of place.
Yes.
So for me, like, I understand, like, in-person events are not as scalable as online events. In-person events are more expensive than online events. It's fine. Like, I totally get that. I think there's room for both. I think it'll be really interesting to see how it goes, and it'll be really interesting to see if more companies or more communities like mimic the model.
That would be really interesting, actually. Carter, I think we've gone way over the time that you gave me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
I just kept asking you. I kept having more questions. So thank you for answering all of them.
Of course. Yeah, no, super happy to be here. I think I hope that, for folks who are listening, if you haven't been to a hackathon, go to a hackathon. Like, take it from Jack. They can be really, really fun. And if you live in a community where there just aren't a lot of hackathons, there are plenty of resources and plenty of people like me and other folks that I know that would be more than happy to kind of show you the ropes. So it's a super fun thing, and definitely worth participating in and worth doing. Oh, and by the way, we're actually, me and a bunch of folks here in the Seattle area are organizing the first ever Cascadia AI hackathon. It's coming up, I believe, September 20th and 21st. So yeah, I mean, super excited to take all the things that I've learned about hackathons and kind of bring it to the community here in the Seattle area. So really looking forward to that.